guys, welcome back. BDCKR here. We're back with Season 8, Episode 25 of our weekly Q&A videos. I say videos, we also release this as a podcast on all the major podcasting platforms, or at least some of them. I don't know what all of the major podcasting platforms are, but we release them on the ones that are listed in the description of the video, so go ahead and check that out if you want to listen there. This is a good time to ask. If you got questions, send them in, because we had a little bit more trouble pulling questions this week. So it's every once in a while we like to remind you guys, if you have something you want us to answer, I think it's a good jumping off point, let us know. And we're always happy to, we read everything no matter what.
And if there were more things in the news, then it'd be easier for us to ramble. But I think the biggest struggle is actually finding things to say. Mm-hmm. And the benefit of the comments and the questions is sometimes this takeoff point that's not necessarily answering that particular question, but it makes us think of other things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But anyways, our first comment of the week that we're going to talk about comes from Mitra. And they say, love this podcast. I've been telling people how awesome Birds of Prey really is, contrary to popular opinion. Felt the same about Scrubs, like you said. And yeah, basic damage gears for the win, since I don't have most of the overpowered gears. Just got the Master's Death card this week. I see opponents with 450 times 3, and usually run the other way. So it's cool that you share our opinions on a lot of stuff.
It's not as unpopular an assessment as you might think, right?
Yeah.
Because we're relatively mainstream, I think.
That's true. I don't know about that. I'm not 100 for some stuff at least.
Yeah, I think a lot of this times when we're talking about media, it's not even so much that it's good or it's bad. There's going to be a large proportion of people. There's going to be a large proportion of people that agree. There's going to be another smaller but still significant number that disagree. Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of times it just has to do with getting exposure. Like if you don't see it, then you're not going to have a chance to like it or even to get an opinion about it. And there's just so much going on that we rely a lot more on people who curate stuff for us, like to give us an opinion that we trust. And there's just not enough time. So this is funny. I was listening to this or watching these videos about censorship that Ada Palmer had set up.
Yeah.
And they were basically lectures at University of Chicago. And one of the things that one of the panelists mentioned was, at one point, you could have read every single book that was ever published. So you would be considered well-read if you had read every single book in existence.
Like in your language?
No, in existence. Like there were that few number of books where people were still, I guess it's when they first started with the printing press, right?
Yeah.
To mass produce books, that was maybe like a step up above like hand printing or hand copying every document. Mm-hmm. And so, the time that it takes to actually produce a book is so much more than the time it takes to read it. So that you could stay on top of, can you imagine watching every TV show that's being produced? You could read every single book. The number of books that are in existence now, you couldn't even own every single book, never mind read all of them.
Yeah. So
it's just interesting, right? That there's just
so much content coming out now.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think for anything that's like popular enough, how people feel about it, there's not a lot of different ways, and I think there's sort of different types of people that feel different ways about a piece of media, and I think that if you were sort of to chart out like how people felt about different stuff, it would just be like a bunch of like bell curves with sort of different peaks where it's like somebody who likes this type of thing, where most people who share a lot of similarities.
Yeah.
And sometimes the similarities might just be as simple as like likes whatever genre thing it is. Everybody's opinions are probably sort of going to be clustered around that same sort of average opinion.
Yeah. So you were pointing out to me a long time ago why Spotify's algorithm for suggesting music works so much better. I think it makes a lot more sense. Instead of trying to impose your categories on what it is, you find the association. It's the same thing in statistics, right?
Have I ever shared it on the channel before?
Or maybe not. So maybe let me try to butcher it a little bit. But
okay. So
that association between things, right? Mm-hmm. So it's not necessarily causation, but that association, you don't care what it is because it exists. That somebody who likes this particular song happens to have this other song on their playlist. If you like one of them, maybe there's a chance, whatever the connection is, that you don't. So it no longer requires somebody to curate it or to judge it or to categorize it. Say, well, these songs are in a similar category. Yeah. No. These two songs, somebody likes both of them. Mm-hmm. Hey, maybe you'll like both of them too.
Yeah. So that's the one cool thing, that Spotify does a million different things. Spotify does some waveform analysis too. So it can pull stuff out of songs that aren't necessarily in the metadata. Information like potentially BPM, like distinguishing what instruments are on a song.
Yeah.
Right? And other stuff about literally just like the frequency and the sound, right? Even just like average frequency. And so they can do some sort of back-end math that nobody really understands to do stuff like maybe how many vocalists are on it, right?
Right.
And they can say like, oh, well, this person tends to like stuff, you know, and they can use those things weighted in whatever their formulas that, you know, not even the people at Spotify probably understand.
Right.
To try to recommend you stuff. That's one of the things they do. The other thing they do is very simple, which is just, you know, like genre information, stuff like that, sort of the basic stuff that actually is attached to the song that you can just pull out automatically. And then what you're talking about is how they weigh song recommendations based off of looking at music that other people listen to, and specifically focusing on playlists that other people have, because playlists tend to be roughly organized around some sort of unifying idea. Right? Even if it's broad, it's like all the music this person likes, or it's based off of a mood, or it's based off of something else.
Right.
And so they can pull like songs that you listen to a lot, and then cross-reference them and to say, oh, well, you like listening to these 5 songs, and we found a bunch of other playlists that all have this exact same set of 5 songs. And on a lot of these playlists, they also have these songs. So we're assuming that whoever put them on the playlist, and the way that you put all these songs on a playlist or are all in your rotation listening, that there's something that's similar about you two. So this is somebody who's recommending music that who listens to something you already like, and is just recommending you some extra stuff that's supposed to be in some way sort of connected to the stuff that you already like.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, because making recommendations is always a difficult thing, because I think if you know a particular form of media or a particular genre well enough, you have a sense of the different nuances, and it makes it easier because of your experience to find something that they'll like. But it makes it harder to pick something because you recognize that there isn't always something universal that everybody will like.
Yeah.
If you get a better idea of the other things that they've read or seen or watched and enjoyed, and you can figure out what it is that's there that they like, it makes it so much easier from your experience to pick something that sort of fits the bill.
Yeah, and that's what's really interesting about recommendation algorithms, and they've gotten like a lot better recently, actually, like significantly better, really fast, because of like neural networks and AI, whereas before they couldn't be, because the problem with recommendations is that the type of information that you have about a piece of media tend to be really sort of data poor. Right? Like, if you look at like the information you have about like a movie or a TV show that you can like Google, right? It'll tend to be like what, like the actors in it, the genre, like people who have worked on it, right?
You can also
like
find
the average
ratings.
runtime.
I mean, there's a lot more aggregation of reviews and ratings.
Yeah, and you can find aggregated ratings, but those aggregated ratings don't tell you about the type of people who rate things in a certain way, right? So, you know, and for most recommendation algorithms, you can't just steal somebody else's data, right? So, you know, even if you do have a site like Netflix, you can't just like steal, for example, like all of Rotten Tomatoes, like databases, and then look at all the ratings, look at all the user ratings, and then like cross-reference all the other stuff that the user likes. Like, that's not data that you have access to unless you collect it yourself.
Right.
For a lot of these recommendation algorithms.
Right.
And the problem is, to do good recommendations, you often need something that's really not quantitative, the way that the data that you can collect with something like Netflix is. What you need is data that's more qualitative, right? What other stuff have you liked? How much did you like it? What's the underlying reason for liking it? And, you know, it's only been recently that you can do something like a neural network where you can sort of almost, not quite, but almost pull qualitative data out of quantitative metrics. Right? Where you can feed so much stuff into it. So like how long you spend looking at a show, you know, how, like what percentage of time when you finish one episode, do you start the next episode right away? You know, how like regularly do you watch a show? Do you click on the recommendations where they say, if you like the show, you like blank, are you more likely to click on that for, you know, show A that you watched or show B? And if you're more likely to click on, you know, the similarity recommendations for show A, you probably like show A a little bit better. Right? And so you can take all of this stuff that is, you can take so much quantitative data that no real person would ever be able to analyze it. And almost turn it into qualitative data. Not
Right.
quite, but you sort of, the computer can do its best approximation of it, and it can get a lot closer to making what feels like sort of a recommendation that a real person might make you, as opposed to how it would work before, where you really have so little to go on.
Right.
Right?
Right.
So yeah, I think that's something really interesting with tech that's been happening recently, and I'm kind of interested to see where it goes. And it's funny because in some places it's really good, and in some places, even when it's really big companies, it's still not so good. And there's still very obvious flaws for recommendation stuff a lot of the time too.
Right.
And so it's one of the things that people talk about a lot actually is TikTok. I think is really interesting for that, because TikTok, just based off of what you engage with, you can follow people and you can go through your follow feed. But the main way that anybody interacts with TikTok is through their For You page, and it's just an automatically refreshed thing. And I've heard a lot of people talk about how good TikTok is at recommending you content that is for you. To the point where a bunch of people will, there are people who like make content who are like, if you're watching this video, you were probably this, and this. Just because they know that if they put it out, that their audience is like them or has similar sensibilities.
Right.
And so they just say stuff about themselves, and they know you're probably on this area of TikTok, and this is the stuff you see because this is the content that I see, and this is the type of person that I make the content for. And so people will go, oh my gosh, like, you know, it's weird that you can just have a video that says this is the type of person you are, and the algorithm will send it your way. And so, you know, that's really
cool and creepy.
It's cool and it's creepy. Yeah, that's the thing, is that
double C.
You can have this ecosystem that you've not said, like, I'm interested in this. But you can exist in entirely different ecosystems in TikTok, where you're getting totally different sets of content. And the other really weird thing about TikTok is that there clearly is also some amount of care given to seeing content in specific orders, because a lot of times people reference other stuff, something will go viral in one place, and then there will be like a story. Like there was one thing that was like the somebody bought like a sign and or bought a screen, like a monitor,
Okay.
and they plugged it in at home, and it would only display the Arby's menu, and it turned out that they bought some like Arby's, like it was like an Arby's menu sign that somebody had stolen. And then there was like another TikTok.
Wait,
like,
but they thought it was a monitor?
yeah, because it's a screen. It's like the Arby's, like, digital, like, it's an Arby's.
But that's interesting then, because I guess you could repurpose it if you figure out where its memory was stored, and then you could
something like that. Yeah.
All right, that's cool.
But then there was a bunch of other people who posted about it. Somebody was like, you know, the Arby's that had it was like, somebody stole our sign, and then they posted about it on TikTok because they saw it blowing up. And so one of the things was that a lot of people saw that content in the same order, even when it was all out. They saw one thing, then the other thing, then the other thing. And the order that they engaged with it was like sort of the correct order to experience that narrative.
Right.
And
all right. So everything you're saying makes me make connections to other things. It makes me think of her story. Makes me think of how I'm looking forward to having a different monitor that can run portrait. It is interesting though, like how much it matters. Like even in video games, games that are on Rails, how much it matters that the person who created it it matters to them that you see it in a certain order, and that it doesn't work, and very rarely does media work. But then there was the whole choose your own adventure stuff, which is very much like her story. It's not a lot like it, but it means you can get to it from different ways.
Yeah, that there's different stuff that you do and don't see.
Yeah.
But what's really interesting about that is that when I'm on TikTok and I see stuff happen in order,
right,
and I'm engaging with it, and I go to the comments, a lot of the comments are just being like, oh wow, I came here from whatever video and I just saw that, and they've seen the content in the same order that I have. And there's been one or two times where I've seen somebody referencing something and I don't know what they're referencing, and like most of the time when I go into the comments on those, some of the top comments are like, I don't know what this is a reference to, can someone explain it to me? And so what's really interesting is that clearly the algorithm also accounts for order in some way. And I wouldn't be able to tell you exactly why. I think, my best guess is that people who don't know what it's referencing are less likely to like it or less likely to engage with it.
Right.
And so the algorithm can actually take into account, if they've seen this, then showing them this later means that they're more likely to engage with it, which is, you know, what they are trying to maximize engagement. But I find it so strange that TikTok has dialed down so much that you can have sort of your own personal curated ecosystem that is not at all based off of not at all, but like not only based off of like people that you follow, where it'll be like basically, and you'll have people come up over and over again, even if you don't follow them, if you tend to engage with their stuff. Yeah. And that's why one of the things is like my behavior with TikTok is very different. If I see a creator that makes something funny, I don't follow initially. If they come up another couple times and I still find them funny and I remember them, that's when I follow, because I know that if that piece of content was a one-off and I won't like their other stuff, then I probably won't see any more stuff. And if it's not a one-off and I like it, then and there's other stuff is similar, then it'll probably come back to me.
And then you become a next data point, actually. Like, it's just really accumulating more data for the next person who comes along that they can make a better recommendation.
But the fact that not only can they do that, but and I don't know if this is confirmation bias or not, but that it seems like to me that there is, to at least some extent, like seeing stuff in the, like, quote unquote right order. Or that seeing like one piece of content without the other piece of content, that there's like bundles where they say, you know, this TikTok and this TikTok, engaging with one sort of makes it more likely to see a specific other piece of content.
Right.
Means that I have to imagine that it's a super sophisticated algorithm.
Right.
And I find it really, really interesting.
Right. That's interesting.
Yeah.
I feel that, all right, so again, makes me think of other things too. How on Facebook, you know how they recommend people that you may know?
Yeah.
And sometimes it's based on just your connections and people that you're friends with.
Yeah.
I had the weirdest experience. One of the pictures that showed up was a poker player.
Yeah.
I thought, how do I know this person? And I took a look. We both played Boggle-style games. And I knew them from before, and the name did not twig until I took a closer look and realized, oh, that's who that is.
So you actually knew them. Facebook recommended them to you, but you didn't even know them well enough to seeing their picture and their name.
Right. It was only seeing the name without the picture, because that there was, it's contextual, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's like when you see somebody that you normally know in one situation, if you see them out of that context, you don't always necessarily recognize them. Like, if you don't know them well enough.
Did you have any mutual friends?
One or two, I think.
Okay.
And that's what made the connection. But you see those recommendations. It's like if you know one person, one or two people that are in a group, then often they'll recommend their whole network of friends, right?
Yeah.
And so I see that a lot. And I actually have people who have way more friends in common, but they happen to be just this one group of people that we know. Mm-hmm. So it's just interesting. It's just weird.
Yeah.
It just came up.
It is weird. And it's interesting how much of the sort of environment around us now is determined by algorithms. It's like how when YouTube changed it so they stopped recommending more popular videos of a similar genre, that they accidentally created a bunch of extremist political people,
right,
and rocketed them to success. And how Facebook, because the way that it recommends people who post more, and it sort of looks at total engagement more than like meaningfulness of engagement, like per piece of content,
right,
that it ended up creating a bunch of essentially super users, where people who post constantly are rewarded a lot more than people who post smart, and how that actually let spammers, like bots, like Russian trolls and like other sort of like bad actors basically engage with the system. So it's interesting how we can both have a really sort of powerful strong recommendation algorithm on one hand, and then on the other hand like can't even reliably prevent religious or political extremism from being signal boosted.
I mean, you can really say that a lot of times the decisions that are made by the programmers algorithm isn't created in a vacuum. Mm-hmm. The decisions that the programmers make to create the algorithm, whether intentionally or not, are the ones that give you this.
Yeah. Oh yeah, no, it absolutely is what they weigh and what they do, but I think that's the advantage, obviously, of having better recommendations and having stuff that's more up to the algorithm and doing stuff to a level of quality that you wouldn't be able to do without people, is really counterbalanced by the fact that you sort of just have to pick a couple variables that the algorithm is going to value.
Yeah.
Give it tell it to make an output and then just have no clue what it's doing. Right? And you can make a really small decision like, I want to stop recommending people just whatever the more popular video is on basically the same topic and accidentally create, you know, a non-zero number of neo-Nazis. We don't have the exact numbers, right? I couldn't tell you how many people that YouTube change radicalized, but it is definitely a non-zero number. And at the very least, something that I can guarantee that it did is help launch the careers of like extremist political commentators. Like multiple. So
I off the top of my head, I'm thinking Alex Jones.
Alex Jones, absolutely. Steven Crowder, at least some. I don't know if people like Ben Shapiro got pulled into that. Paul Joseph Watkins, but he's with InfoWars, so he's with Alex Jones. There's different people. Right.
Okay. Here I was thinking we'd run out of things to say.
Because
we didn't have a lot of questions, but we should. You know what? I should probably answer this particular question though, because we got to the comment, but there's a concrete sort of. Well, it's actually not even a question, but I wanted to point something out about the game.
Okay, so let me read it, because it's been 20 minutes. And yeah, basic damage gear for the win, since I don't have most of the overpowered gears. Just got the Master's Death Card this week. I see opponents with 450 times 3, and usually run the other way. Yeah,
if you feel like your team isn't strong enough, maybe take a look at all the teammates. Don't just look at the numbers, because the gear loadouts sometimes aren't ideal. And I think it's probably worth trying if they're not well constructed.
Yeah.
I would just go ahead and do it. And if the alternative would have been just to not fight, then I don't think there's an ethical case to be made that you have to take the loss if you lose. Because if you just quit before the final screen of the fight, like as you get knocked out at the end, the fight doesn't count against you. And you could look at it as that you're taking away points from them, or you could look at it as, well, I wasn't going to fight anyways, the only reason I'm going to try it is to see if my team is good enough. And I don't think anybody will hold that against you. I mean, I'm sure that a lot of times our teams are actually pretty effective, and I'm sure we don't get more wins simply because some people just rage quit. And I wouldn't characterize this as rage quitting either. I think it's a chance to experiment a little bit and just figure out if the next fight is worth doing and get a better sense of what loadouts really work and what don't.
Although if you do lose and you want to give somebody some battle points, there's no
there's no harm to you, except I guess the opportunity cost if it means that somebody else ends up ranking higher, because you know, when you get a win on defense when you're not actively fighting, it counts as twice as much as winning when you're on offense.
So there we go. Our next comment comes from Irish Shakespeare, and they say, what if Injustice Mobile gets updated battle fighting skills like Marvel Contest of Champions?
I mean, that'll never happen. If they're even considering it, it's going to be the next iteration, because they did that. They changed the mechanics for Injustice 2 mobile. So I think
mostly for the worst, for everything that I saw.
It wasn't awful. I think it was more complicated, and I'll be honest with you, I've never been great at those games where the input gets really complicated. The closest I ever came to doing that kind of thing was maybe Street Fighter 2.
Yeah, I mean, for the actual fighting mechanics itself, that's fair. I mean, like, most of the other changes I think were worse. And I think the thing that I've learned about mobile games is that they tend to work a lot better, actually, the more simple the moment-to-moment gameplay loop is. Right? You can have a really complicated system underneath it, but the more simple it is to actually physically play it. So, like, I'm thinking of the game Downwell, which I really love, which is built from the ground up for mobile, has very few buttons, is super fast-paced, super frantic, and super precise, but it's only 3 buttons. It's only left, right, and then like a button that's sometimes, like a contextual-based button that's either jump or shoot, depending on whether you're in the air or not. And that game is great. And then I'm thinking about a game that I love also called Dead Cells, which is really, really good on PC, or anything with a controller, and really is not great on mobile. And I bought it on mobile, and I'm happy to have bought it because I love to support developers, and it's a lot cheaper on mobile.
Not for the game itself, but because
the experience is so much less tight on mobile. And just overall so much less worth sinking your time into. It's a lot less worth playing just because it's more complicated. And so I think the issue that a game like Injustice has is that it's not the it doesn't have a particularly satisfying moment-to-moment mechanical feel, right?
Right.
Winning is cool, building up stuff is cool, and, you know, playing the little mini-games is engaging, right? Getting your timing right, can be satisfying.
Right.
But it's not the best. It's like a 6 out of 10, 7 out of 10 gameplay. It's good enough to get you to keep playing, and there's enough for you to get good at, but it's not, you know, super fun inherently.
But you don't stay for the user interface and the gameplay. To me, it's both a collecting game and a fighting game, and it's so much better as a collecting game.
Yeah. It's good as a collecting game. It's good as, like, sort of a goal game. And there's a lot of games that have really bad moment-to-moment gameplay, right? Like, almost every idle game has, like, no moment-to-moment gameplay, right? It has maybe,
what is
like...
an idle game?
An idle game, like clicker games.
Oh, okay.
And, you know, some idle games do actually put a lot of stuff on top of it. But the vast majority of idle games, the basic gameplay is like a 1 or a 2 out of 10 because it's just tapping, it's just clicking. Your level of engagement is so sort of surface, and most of it comes in from planning, and they can build other stuff on top of it, you know, and build really cool gameplay loops. They can build mini games, they can build alternate modes, and they can build a lot of thinking into the game. But the actual gameplay itself is not the focus. And I think Injustice is, you know, better than an idle game in terms of gameplay. Right. But I think it's in the same genre where it's the other systems that you build out around the actual base gameplay is what makes it worth playing. And so I think making it more complicated doesn't actually lead to it being a more satisfying experience.
Yeah, case in point, Injustice 2.
Yeah, making it tighter would make it a more satisfying experience. If it was a game, if they turned the fighting component of it, for example, into something like a rhythm game, right, where there are 3 buttons. Enemies' attacks would come at you in 3 different flashes before they attacked, and you would sort of counter with different colors, right? That might be a much more fun sort of moment-to-moment gameplay experience.
Yeah.
But that's not really what the game is about. And so it works sort of being as fun as it is and not needing to be more fun in that aspect, because the fun comes in a lot of these sort of other components. And a lot of the fun comes in what you do when you're not playing, like when you're not actually in a fight. Mm. I think the vast majority of the fun comes when you're out of the actual fight itself in Injustice. I don't know if you feel the same way. I
guess it depends on how close the fights are.
That's true. On a really close fight,
I think there is sometimes a satisfaction when you sort of by the skin of your teeth. You're almost about to lose, and you pull it out of your hat.
Yeah.
And I think that's actually one of the reasons why multiplayer is so much better than the story mode.
It's because it's balanced better?
It gives you the opportunity to win when it's unbalanced. Mm-hmm. So when you are... The story mode is built so that if you are not at the right level, you will be less likely to have success. That's why it favors getting hit for generating power over hitting.
Yeah.
So that means the more you're actually able to do damage against the opponent, the more power they build up, builds up their offensive potential, and they get their bars first, and then they're able to knock you out.
That's true. There is a certain amount of joy in the back and forth.
Yeah.
But to me, anyways, I think most of the joy is figuring out what your next goal is, figuring out what you're working for.
Oh, for sure. That's
making a plan about how you're going to load people up with gear, figuring out what you want to do. And then the part of the fun in the actual fight itself is sort of the execution of your plan.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Where you have sort of your goal if you're trying to get Phantom Zone progress done in a specific way. Or if you set an arbitrary goal for yourself, right? Like you have a sort of a sub goal within a fight where depending on who, like how the enemy team is laid out, you're like, well, I want to swap this guy in at this time to counter this, right? Or I want to knock this person out first, right? I want to knock this person out early, and then sort of those intermediate goal setting things to me are more fun than the actual gameplay. And the gameplay to do that is, mostly just muscle memory. And building up muscle memory over time.
Because I think I'm really guilty of this, where I set myself up to play a certain way, and then if I haven't thought ahead, I will just do the same thing. And that's why the beauty of the Flashpoint team is that it actually takes advantage of that, where Flashpoint Aquaman, I've got him geared so that I always do his first special.
Yeah.
So it doesn't matter if they got Astral Harness or not, because I've got Claw of Horus. there's a chance I'm going to knock it out, a 1 in 4 chance that I'm going to shatter their astral harness. And then the person that I tag in is going to be able to handle them easily.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh yeah, for sure. The less thinking there is, it's like it's like playing Boggle. The less thinking you have to do when you're playing, the better you're going to be at it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting
and
connections.
for all of it, I think it is a very good game. I don't want to...
Oh, I love it.
Make it sound like I don't like it when I'm describing it that way. I just think that, you look at sort of like the extreme ends of that. A game like Doom, right? The Doom games really, really heavily rely on the moment-to-moment gameplay. A game like Downwell, like in the examples that I was saying, a game like Downwell is always going to be more fun to be handed. If you don't know anything about the game, if you're handed it for the first time, a game like Downwell is going to be more fun, I think, to anybody that you hand it to within like 5 minutes of playing it than Injustice is. And it's sort of investment and thinking about it and the systems that make this game fun.
I felt exactly the same way about Renegade Midnight Star. There was the collecting of the gear. There's the planning of which gears to shatter to use the resources to get the other ones.
Yeah.
There was buying more packs to get more random stuff. I loved that game.
And your device could barely run the game itself.
It was. The interface was pretty easy. It wasn't on rails. I loved the daily sort of challenges. And I was so sad when they shut down the servers because it wouldn't support... I even have a Midnight Renegade Star t-shirt.
Yeah.
I was so sad when they shut down the servers and the game will not run without the servers. You can't play it offline.
Yeah. You should look at the developers and see what else they've made.
Yeah, that's true. I just, honestly, for the time I've got, there's so much content out there. I've probably got like a few dozen books that I've bought that I think these are my kind of thing, and I just haven't been able to get around to reading them.
Yeah.
I probably underestimate a couple dozen. It's probably low. Yeah.
So there we go. I think we got pretty far away from it, but what if Injustice gets updated battle fighting skills? You didn't really answer.
Yeah, well, if they did, I think it's not going to happen. But if they did, it would actually, I think, ruin the game, or it would hurt the game. It wouldn't ruin it necessarily, but it would make it worse.
Yeah, we don't really want a more complex experience. I think if they did anything to the fighting gameplay, you would want it in a new game. And what I would want to see is something that would be more of an overhaul that favors less sort of tapping more things, doing more stuff at once, and more favors what would really work for a mobile game, which is simple controls, but doing something like reaction time or focusing on something that's like an inherently satisfying gameplay loop that you can execute with like as few buttons as possible. You want to, I think, remove the artifice and remove sort of systems built up on the actual moment-to-moment gameplay, and you want to build your systems other places. Yeah.
There's a reason why people are button mashers.
Yeah.
Because it's still fun that way. Yeah.
So our next thing comes from Apocalypse, and they say, in online matches, if you are going against metal characters, be sure to check their abilities first. I just lost a fight against Metal Black Adam and Metal Shazam, where Adam was taking down 1/8 of my health every second without touching me, and Shazam stealing 1,000,000% of my power every time he used a special.
Alright, so before I get to what I thought I was going to say about this, as I'm seeing that question one more time, I think this is probably the best argument for why when you set up a team, the most effective team is going to be one that is geared for offense. Because these are all sort of defensive issues, right? Yeah. If they take every 1/8 of a second, that means I need to finish the game fast. Yeah. Sorry, not 1/8 of a second. Every 1/8 of my health for every second. So that's 8 seconds I've got.
Per character, yeah.
Yeah, I'm ready. I need to be ready to knock them out quick. And if Shazam is stealing 1,000,000% of my power every time he uses a special, I want to knock him out before he hits me with a special. So, there's nothing, you can't survive 1,000,000. But what this question originally made me think of was, do you remember when they first introduced online play and gears? I think around the same time.
Everybody was hacking.
Everybody was hacking, but they were hacking the abilities of the gears so high that not only were they duplicate gears, so that what was felt as being the most important gears were on all 3 characters, and then the abilities were max past what they should have been, so that you tag in with like a few bars of power instead of 1 for Razalgul Scimitar. or they would do like millions of damage because the gear score would be like 1,000 something. Remember that?
Yeah. And it sucks that there's still hackers, because I think the problem is that the game popularity is to a point where there's less people who are motivated to hack.
Yeah.
But the moderation has sort of declined in lockstep with it.
Yeah.
So now they're also a lot less good at removing people who hack.
If they care.
Yeah, I don't even know if they do remove people who hack.
I think they don't. I think there's still people at the end of the season on the leaderboard that hack their way onto it.
Yeah. Which is hard.
And yeah, so we still have a couple questions, but I think this is a natural ending spot as we see our final fight and we get our final crystal in the Phantom Zone. Yeah,
I think part of the problem is that part of what makes us like Injustice is the ability to glitch and everything, right? And that made us stick with it for as long as we have. The fact that there are so many glitches in the game also mean that there's sort of that wiggle room for people to hack it, I think, a lot more easily.
Yeah.
And it sucks that people can hack stuff, hack data that gets sent to the server, right? To update for online play, because I still don't know how people would do that, because it should seem, you'd imagine they'd do better than that.
Right.
Yeah, I guess we'll see what we got for the crystal here for anybody who's watching on the video.
And we'll tell you. Commentary. Blackest Night, Martian Manhunter, not bad. Not the greatest, but not the worst.
Yeah. Okay. And so there we go. That brings us to the end of our video. We have some questions for next week, actually, so...
There you go.
That's good. First off, I'd like to give a shout-out to Eliza, the mask mailer Caton. She's sending out masks as a fundraiser for a club she's in, and I just received mine. This shout-out was brought to you by an envelope packed with fancy tape and a handwritten note.
Well, that's nice. I love getting packages.
Personal touch.
Yeah.
So there we go. Thanks for the mask, Eliza. We'd also like to give a thank you to everybody who supports us on Patreon.
And that would be Consul Peasant and Edwoon at the top tier, last word. Mohammed Albshaiti at the Your Message Here tier. Shawn Farrell, Daniel Simonson, Aaron Maule, Michael DeVries, Brandon C., Irvin Ruiz, and Eddydoo, who support us at the credited level. And Chris Wolf, Scarlet Danny, Awesome Gamer 2for1, Pavu RS, Gavin Malott, and Isfar E. at the gratitude level.
There you go. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see y'all next time.
Komoda.